surgery before raising the sail and getting off the mooring and heading out for one of the most beautiful sails I have ever done.
From the outside, her life looked unreal. Endless ocean, golden light, and a kind of freedom most people only imagine. Bobby White wasn't just living the dream. She was the reason so many believed it was possible. Every moment felt effortless. Every smile felt real. Until suddenly, it all stopped. No final message, no explanation, just an absence that no one saw coming. And as the silence grew louder, one question kept echoing everywhere. Not where she disappeared to, but what could make someone walk away from a life like that without ever looking back? The vanishing that left everyone waiting. There's a strange kind of quiet that settles over a community when someone deeply familiar disappears without a word. It's not empty silence. It's the kind where people hold their breath, staring into glowing screens late at night, refreshing again and again, scrolling through old posts in reverse, as if the truth might be hidden somewhere between the likes, the comments, and those golden hour sunsets frozen in time. That exact silence took over the Sailing Doodles audience the moment Bobby White stopped showing up. No emotional farewell, no last video filled with tears, no neatly pinned explanation. One moment she was there, alive, essential, impossible to replace. And the next, she simply wasn't. And that absence carried a weight that felt intentionally left unsaid. Sailing Doodles had always been built around a life people only imagined during quiet breaks at their desks. Endless ocean horizons, hidden islands that seemed untouched by time, dogs enjoying the salty wind, and at the center, a couple whose connection felt real in a world full of polished personas. Bobby White wasn't just part of the journey. She was its emotional core. She was the one viewers connected with, especially when their own lives felt stuck. Her open smile making the vast ocean feel welcoming instead of overwhelming. So when she disappeared without any explanation, the audience reacted the only way they knew how. They talked. They searched. They replayed old videos, pausing at moments that suddenly felt different in hindsight. A subtle tension in her eyes. A laugh arriving just a fraction too late. Even comment sections that had quietly been restricted without notice. Sailing Doodles kept posting after Bobby was gone. The boat still moved forward. The destinations kept changing. The dogs stayed just as loyal and photogenic. But something in the emotional balance had shifted completely, and viewers felt it instantly, like noticing a missing chair at a familiar table before even counting the seats. What really happened to Bobby White quickly turned into a question that echoed everywhere. First whispered, then openly discussed across platforms. It spread beyond sailing fans into wider lifestyle communities. Online forums filled with long threads, stretching into hundreds of pages and thousands of voices. Some responded with empathy and respect. Others crossed boundaries that should never be touched. And many were simply searching for closure, for answers, for a sense of peace about someone who once made their hardest mornings feel a little less heavy. The woman behind the story. Before questions and speculation ever existed, there was simply a woman living her life. And long before millions of viewers followed her journey, there was someone trying to create a path that the people closest to her didn't always fully understand or support. Bobby White didn't step into Sailing Doodles as a polished personality designed for attention. She grew into her place naturally, the way people do when life demands more than they expected to give. She entered the story mainly as Bradley's partner, which at that time meant she revolved around a narrative centered on a man chasing his dream with his dogs across open water. But audiences don't always follow structure. They respond to feeling. And what caught them, unexpectedly and powerfully, was Bobby. Her presence on camera wasn't rehearsed or carefully measured. It was something quieter, more real. She didn't seem concerned with looking perfect. And in letting go of that, she became impossible to ignore. She laughed freely, without holding back. She spoke honestly about fear on the water, without immediately masking it with forced bravery. She held the dogs with a kind of genuine affection that didn't feel performed. And viewers responded with a level of loyalty no early prediction could have fully captured. As the channel grew, Bobby became more than just part of the story. She became its emotional center. Many viewers openly said they stayed because of her, even when uploads slowed or quality shifted. For many, especially women, she represented something deeper. She showed that you didn't need to be fearless or fully prepared to choose a different life. That being open about doubts didn't make you weak, it made the journey real. In different moments, she shared parts of her life before the boat, carefully but honestly. There had been work that didn't fulfill her, relationships that didn't last, and a period where she felt lost, like drifting without direction. Then came the boat. And in one moment that stayed with viewers, she said it was the first place she had ever truly felt like herself without apology. That line stayed with people. They repeated it, shared it, held on to it. Because in giving that feeling a voice, Bobby had offered something rare, words for something many had felt but never been able to explain. And she gave it freely, asking only that people stay with her on the journey ahead. The hidden fractures no one noticed in time. Looking back, hindsight has a way of removing all the noise and leaving behind only the moments that truly mattered. After Bobby's disappearance, dedicated viewers of Sailing Doodles went through old content with intense focus, almost like emotional archivists. What they began to notice was not a sudden break, but a slow and nearly invisible crack forming beneath what once seemed like a perfect uninterrupted life. At first, the changes were almost impossible to catch. Around late 2022 into 2023, longtime viewers sensed a shift in the tone of the videos. Bobby appeared less frequently, though not enough to raise immediate concern. And when she did appear, she was still present, still engaged, but something felt different. People described her as tired. Others said she seemed more careful, almost like someone choosing her words the way a sailor carefully steps on a deck that has suddenly become unstable. She began speaking more openly about the emotional weight of life on the water. That honesty had always been part of who she was, but now it carried a different tone. Earlier, her vulnerability came with a strong sense of optimism, as if the challenges were simply the price of a beautiful life. But later, that optimism felt more fragile, like it required effort to maintain, even for herself. Individually, none of these moments seemed alarming, but together, they painted a picture of someone under growing pressure. Life on a boat is far from simple. It demands physical strength, emotional resilience, and constant cooperation. There's limited space, constant reliance on another person, and no real escape from conflict when it arises. People who crossed paths with Bobby and Bradley during this time described a relationship facing real challenges, not the kind created for views, but the quiet, exhausting kind that happens behind the scenes. There were disagreements about the future of the channel, about balancing content creation with real life, and about where their journey should go next as both of them changed in different ways. At the same time, Bobby reportedly struggled with the reality of being part of the creator world. She understood what the platform gave her, but she also began to feel the cost. There was a growing sense that her emotions were no longer entirely her own, that even her most private moments had become something for others to watch and feel. This kind of tension sits at the center of modern content creation, but it's rarely spoken about openly. Bobby, however, seemed to confront it more directly, and that struggle left visible marks over time. There were also mentions of health issues, fatigue, and physical challenges that were briefly acknowledged but never fully explained. These moments passed quickly in the flow of content, but attentive viewers didn't forget them. By the time 2023 moved into 2024, the gap between the life being shown and the life actually being lived had grown too wide to ignore. And under that pressure, something significant, something structural, was bound to finally break. The turning point that could not be reversed. Every story that truly matters reaches a point where everything changes, a moment when the tension built over time can no longer stay contained and quietly shifts into something irreversible. In the story of Bobby White and Sailing Doodles, that moment did not arrive as a dramatic scene or a viral clip. Instead, it came quietly, shaped by the accumulated weight of everything that had been held together for far too long, until it simply became too much for anyone to carry. By early 2024, Bobby White had fully stepped away from active involvement in the Sailing Doodles channel. There was no detailed explanation, no clear statement that satisfied the audience. And that silence itself spoke loudly. When someone so consistently present suddenly disappears without closure, people understand that the full story exists somewhere, but remains intentionally unshared, likely for reasons that are deeply personal or painful, or both. The channel continued forward as if nothing had stopped. Bradley kept posting regularly. The dogs remained as familiar and engaging as ever. New locations continued to appear, but something fundamental had changed. The emotional connection viewers once felt shifted noticeably, turning what once felt like watching familiar lives into something more distant. The audience reacted in its own way. Questions filled the comments, and subscription patterns quietly reflected how much Bobby's presence had mattered. Bradley addressed her absence carefully, offering only limited insight while expressing concern for her well-being. He explained that she needed time and space, and that her health and happiness came first. Some viewers respected this and accepted it without pushing further. Others searched for deeper meaning in what was left unsaid, trying to understand what had really happened behind the camera. The health concerns that had once been mentioned briefly became more serious during this time. Bobby was facing physical challenges that required her full attention, making it impossible to balance recovery with the constant demands of content creation and life at sea. While the details remained private, the reality was clear. When health becomes the priority, everything else must step back, no matter how important it once seemed. At the same time, the relationship between Bobby and Bradley was also under significant strain. Their partnership, both personal and professional, had reached a point where continuing in the same direction was no longer possible. This wasn't about blame or fault. It was about two people realizing that the path they once shared was no longer aligned as they changed in different ways. What the audience had seen as a love story was also a business partnership operating under constant pressure. And when both the emotional and professional sides begin to struggle at once, the weight becomes overwhelming. Those close to the situation often describe this period with a single word: grief. Not anger, not drama, but a quiet, heavy sadness. The kind that comes when something real, something they deeply shared, begins to fade into something neither person intended. Bobby did not mark her departure with a final message or a closing chapter. There was no goodbye video, no public explanation. She simply stopped appearing. And in that absence, the audience was left to process its own sense of loss, realizing only then how much her presence had truly meant. The quiet aftermath, the noise, and what remained real. When someone the public feels closely connected to disappears without a full explanation, the silence that follows rarely stays empty. People naturally try to make sense of what they don't understand, and in that space, stories begin to form. Fast, emotional, and often detached from reality. After Bobby White stepped away from Sailing Doodles, that exact pattern unfolded, creating a period filled with speculation, projection, and at times, harm towards someone already dealing with more than enough. The rumors that spread during this time grouped themselves into several clear directions, each shaped by its own assumptions and emotional reasoning. One of the most dominant focused on her relationship with Bradley. People questioned whether the separation had been difficult, whether trust had been broken, or whether the imbalance within a channel built under one name had become too much over time. These discussions moved quickly across forums and comment sections, driven by a belief that curiosity somehow justified deeper intrusion. But many of these claims lacked verification, and in several cases were clearly untrue. The situation revealed something uncomfortable about online culture, the way real personal struggles can be turned into content, debated, and consumed without fully considering the human cost behind them. Bobby did not completely disappear. Instead, she maintained a quieter, more controlled presence through her personal social media. What she shared was minimal, but intentional. Small glimpses that showed she was still moving forward, still rebuilding. For those paying attention with genuine care, it was clear she was going through a difficult but purposeful process of recovery. Over time, she addressed parts of her situation, especially regarding her health. Without revealing unnecessary detail, she confirmed that she had been dealing with serious physical challenges that affected both her daily life and her ability to continue creating content. She spoke honestly about reaching a point where stepping away was not a choice, but a necessity, something her body demanded. Another wave of speculation focused on finances. Questions about earnings, contributions, and what she may have been owed circulated widely. While these discussions touched on real issues within content creation, especially when couples build businesses without formal agreements, the specific claims surrounding her situation were largely based on assumption rather than fact. What slowly became visible through all the noise was something much simpler and much more human. Bobby was managing multiple challenges at once, without the support system she once had access to. The same platform that had connected her to millions was also the thing she needed distance from in order to heal. There's a difficult truth in that. Sometimes the community you build becomes something you must step away from to take care of yourself. Bobby had spent years showing up, sharing openly, and giving people something meaningful. And when she needed space, what mattered most was being allowed that space. Gradually, over the following months, the intensity of speculation began to fade. Some people moved on as attention shifted elsewhere. Others noticed the quiet signs of progress in her limited updates. And many, those who had truly connected with her as a person, chose patience, respect, and understanding, offering her the same kindness she had once given so freely. Where Bobby White stands today. Time has a quiet way of bringing clarity to stories that once felt urgent and unresolved. By early 2026, enough distance has passed that Bobby White's story no longer feels like something unfolding in real time, but something deeper, a human story shaped by the cost of public life, the complexity of love built under pressure, and the resilience of someone who was never meant to remain in the background of someone else's journey. Bobby White is alive, she is well, and by every reliable indication, she is finally living life on her own terms. A kind of freedom that, despite appearances, even the open ocean once didn't fully allow her to experience. She has not disappeared from the world, but she has stepped into a quieter version of it. Her personal social media exists, but it is used with intention, not obligation. What she shares is limited yet meaningful. Glimpses of coastlines still appear, showing that her connection to the water was always real. But alongside those are simpler moments, meals made without cameras, light passing through spaces that belong only to her. Pieces of a life that no longer need to be performed. In the few occasions where she has spoken publicly, she has described what it means to reclaim a life that had slowly become shaped by outside expectations. She has made it clear that this process has not been easy. In fact, she has described it as one of the most difficult, yet necessary, experiences of her life. Anyone who has tried to rediscover themselves after living in the public eye would understand exactly what she means. The health struggles she faced during her departure were real, and they demanded serious attention. Over time, with proper care and support, those challenges have reportedly improved. But what stands out is how she now speaks about her body, not with frustration, but with respect, the kind of understanding that often comes only after being forced to listen, when everything else has been pushed too far. Her relationship with Bradley has also shifted into something different. They are no longer together in the way the audience once knew them. But what is notable is not a dramatic ending, but the absence of one. Despite speculation, there was no public collapse, no destructive fallout. Instead, what appears to have happened is something quieter. Two people who once built something meaningful, navigating the difficult process of moving forward without tearing everything apart. In a world where conflict often becomes content, that kind of ending rarely gets attention. But it matters, because it reflects effort, maturity, and a level of respect that survives even after the original form of the relationship has changed. Since 2025 and into 2026, Bobby has been connected to projects in the wellness and intentional living space. These projects are different in scale and intention from her past work. They are quieter, more aligned with the values she has spoken about over the years, particularly around women's health, emotional responsibility, and the challenge of rebuilding identity after a shared life changes direction. Whether she will return to full-scale content creation remains uncertain. And importantly, it appears to be a question she is still asking herself. Not something already decided, but something she is carefully considering. What she wants her life to be, and how much of it she is willing to share again. What is clear, though, is this: she is no longer defined by the expectations that once surrounded her. She is not lost, not erased, and not a side character in someone else's story. She is someone who faced overlapping challenges, personal, physical, and emotional, and made the difficult choice to step away when it mattered most. And now, she is living with a sense of intention that feels quieter, but stronger. The kind of life her most attentive viewers may have recognized she was always searching for, even during the most visible moments of her journey. Bobby White did not disappear. She found her way into her own story, and maybe, not every story is meant to end with clear answers. Some stories simply shift, turning quietly into something we're no longer meant to fully see. Bobby White didn't disappear, she just chose a different path, one that belongs only to her. And sometimes, that's where the real story truly begins. If this story stayed with you, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, because there are always more stories like this, waiting to be told.